My boss fired me to save money, so I evicted his entire company. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Sorry, we have to let you go. We need to save money." I nodded, packed my things, walked out quietly. What he didn't know? He had just fired the landlord. Welcome back to the channel. This story is about arrogance, karma, and the moment someone realizes they messed with the wrong person. But before we jump in, I want to know something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your country and city in the comments. I love seeing how global this community is. And if you enjoy shocking workplace drama, satisfying revenge stories, and twists you don't see coming, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Trust me, by the end of this one, you'll understand why some decisions cost way more than they save. There's a dangerous assumption people make about the guy who brings his own lunch and drives a 10-year-old Toyota. They assume he's desperate. I worked as a senior analyst for a logistics firm for 7 years. I was the first one in and the last one out. My boss, Greg, was a guy who thought leadership meant wearing a Rolex and screaming into a speakerphone. He loved to talk about trimming the fat. On Monday morning, Greg called me into his glass-walled office and told me that because of market shifts, my salary was being cut from the budget. He told me I was a redundant asset. He didn't realize that while I was working for his salary, I was using my inheritance to buy the dirt he was standing on. He didn't just fire his best analyst, he fired his landlord. Greg had just signed a 10-year lease for the top 2 floors of a skyscraper downtown. He bragged about the prestige of the address every single day. The insult, "It's nothing personal, Ryan," Greg said, checking his watch. "But your department is a cost center. We need disruptors, not maintainers. I need your desk cleared by noon, and don't bother asking for a severance. The contract says at will for a reason." I didn't beg for my job. I didn't even look upset. I just went back to my desk, packed my humble lunchbox, and pulled out my personal tablet. I didn't just own the building. I owned the holding company that managed the commercial real estate for the entire block. I pulled up Greg's lease agreement. There it was. Clause 14.2, the Moral and Financial Stability Covenant. The lease specifically stated that the tenant must maintain a certain credit rating and avoid any reputational damage to the building. More importantly, Greg had forgotten to pay the common area maintenance fees for 3 months, claiming the billing portal was broken. I called my property manager. "Hey, Sarah, you know that logistics firm on the 40th floor? They just fired their senior analyst, me. I want a full audit of their lease compliance delivered to their front desk in 1 hour. And Sarah, don't be flexible with the late fees." At 2 p.m., while Greg was in a high-stakes meeting with his biggest investors, a team of 2 sheriffs and my property manager walked into the lobby. I was standing by the elevators, leaning against the marble wall, watching as they handed Greg a 5-day notice to vacate for material breach of contract and unpaid arrears. "What is this?" Greg screamed, coming out of the conference room. "This is a mistake. I know the owner of this building." "Actually, Greg," I said, stepping forward, "you know the guy you fired at 9 a.m., but you've never met the owner of Sterling Holdings. That would be me." The investors looked from me to Greg, then back to the eviction notice. One of them stood up, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out. "If you can't even manage your rent, Greg, why would we trust you with our logistics?" Greg's company didn't last the week. Between the lost investors and the cost of an emergency move, the trimming of the fat ended up cutting the heart right out of his business. He wanted a disruptor? Well, I disrupted his entire life. I ended up converting his old office into a private lounge for my real business partners. Greg thought he was the lion because he had a loud roar. He forgot that the lion still has to live in a cage, and I'm the guy with the keys. The office was buzzing with the news of my firing. My coworkers were looking at their keyboards, too afraid to make eye contact. Greg was already in the glass conference room, laughing and pointing at a whiteboard, probably planning how to spend the savings from my salary. I didn't storm out. I didn't cry. I sat at my desk and pulled a sleek black titanium card from my wallet, my private access key to Apex Realty Group. While Greg was disrupting the logistics industry, I was logging into the building's master portal. See, Greg thought he was renting from a giant faceless corporation. He didn't realize that corporation was a shell company I'd bought 3 years ago using my crypto gains. I pulled up his file. Rent? Paid. Barely. Insurance? Current. Clause 22.4, the right of first refusal and structural integrity. My eyes widened. 2 weeks ago, Greg had a vision to make the office more open concept. He'd knocked down 3 interior walls to foster collaboration. I looked at the permit logs. 0. He'd never asked the landlord for permission to alter the structure. In a skyscraper, knocking down walls without a structural engineer's sign-off isn't just a mistake. It's a catastrophic breach of lease that allows for immediate termination. I picked up my cell and called my lead attorney. "Hey, Marcus, I just got fired from the logistics firm on the 40th floor. Yeah, the one I own. Greg just told me I'm redundant. I want you to file a notice of immediate default based on the unpermitted structural alterations in Suite 4000. "How long do you want to give him to fix it?" Marcus asked. I looked through the glass at Greg, who was currently mocking my old, slow and steady workflow to a group of interns. "Don't give him a second," I said. "Send the marshals. I want the locks changed by the time he finishes his lunch." At 1:45 p.m., Greg was mid-pitch to a group of venture capitalists. Through the glass, I could see him sweating, trying to convince them that firing me was a strategic pivot. Then, the elevator dings echoed through the lobby. Not the sound of a delivery, but the heavy rhythmic thud of 2 city marshals and a locksmith. The marshals didn't knock. They walked straight into the conference room. Greg stopped mid-sentence, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. "Can I help you, officers? We're in a private meeting." "Mr. Gregory Vance?" the lead marshal asked. "We're here to execute a summary eviction for a material breach of your commercial lease, unpermitted structural modifications, and failure to maintain building safety standards. Everyone needs to exit the premises immediately." The investors stood up, clutching their briefcases as if the building were actually on fire. Greg was hyperventilating. "This is a mistake. My landlord is a holding company in Delaware. I'll call them right now." "You don't have to call Delaware, Greg," I said, stepping into the room. I was still holding my cardboard box of personal belongings. "I'm right here." Greg looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Ryan, what are you doing? I told you to clear out your desk." "I did," I said, dropping a thick folder onto the mahogany table. "And as the sole owner of Sterling Holdings, the company that owns this at-will office space, I've decided your company is a cost center for my building. You're a liability, Greg. And as of 5 minutes ago, you're a trespasser." The head investor looked at the eviction notice, then back at me. He didn't even look at Greg. "Ryan, I had no idea you were the Sterling behind the holdings. We'll be moving our portfolio to a more stable firm." As the locksmith began drilling out the cylinders on the front door, Greg slumped into his $2,000 ergonomic chair. "You can't do this. I have a 10-year lease." "You had a lease," I corrected him, "but you wanted a disruptor. Consider your business officially disrupted." By 3 p.m., Greg was standing on the sidewalk with his laptop bag and a potted plant, watching his empire get loaded into a storage unit. He tried to sue, but it's hard to win a legal battle when your opponent owns the courthouse's parking garage. I didn't just save my salary, I saved my peace of mind. Greg thought I was a redundant asset because I was quiet. He forgot that the quietest person in the room is usually the one who owns the walls. I kept my old desk, though. It has the best view of the city I now own.